having some action performed in the cloud. So while you were disconnected from the cloud, your agents would still be up there monitoring information or undertaking interaction with other agents that were up there in the cloud. I don't know, Steve, if you want to add to the description of what it involved, but that's kind of
that was a great description. I think one of the really interesting ideas was that the software itself would travel across the network and execute remotely, as opposed to it just always communicating an RPC over the network. And so that was a really massive shift in the thinking of the network architecture, which is one of the reasons why Nathan Myhrvold ended up buying all the patents. The patent troll company that he runs, when the company eventually closed, he bought the entire patent portfolio, but that was a big part of the value.
I was just
I heard that really irritated. I believe I was listening to Megan and Andy, and that the procurement of those patents really irritated her.
Oh, Megan! Hi, people.
Hi,
Megan.
Hey, Megan.
How's it going?
Good.
We're just talking about telescript. I was just thinking today that I think there's a little telescript movie in me to explain this. Weirdly enough, because I think it's part of the story we didn't tell, but I think it's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
I know it's showing up at Russian bots and destroying our elections.
Even things like the message formatting, like you could have a message that would have a recipient message that would say, I'm going to be home soon, and then there'd be some options for like 15 minutes or 25 minutes or things like that. Just message formatting was like a really smart idea. Never mind all the emoticons and other things that were proposed. I just thought it was a fascinating section. I think I'd love to write about that, actually, just all the ideas that you had for teletext and like what has been adopted and what hasn't still.
Yeah, well, there's two different things. So telescript, you think of it as the back end. You don't really see it. The front end that you just mentioned, like the emojis basically and all that, that's all more manifesting in products like Magic App and others. So the face of it comes through the different products that are the consumer products, and the telescript is like, I don't know, Java communications library, just like running around. And obviously we have bots now and these things, and it's the same idea.
Yeah, it's amazing.
In fact,
Sorry, Steve, please go ahead.
I was going to say one of the great examples that also wasn't told was, Pierre Omidyar. He was a developer support engineer, and so he would write sample applications that we would give the source to the developers so they could see examples of how to write interesting apps. And he would always write these incredibly useful things. So one of them was a turn-based chess game where you could play turn-based games through this chess engine he had that also ran in a PC he ran at home. And that was easily the most popular game on the platform. So I think people, overlook, I think one of his strengths was just really simple, super compelling services. And obviously the next thing he thought of was the auction. So it's, I think there were many, many foundational concepts there where we even had the first instances of not just the technology, but also of the use case, like the App Store and USB and so on. And those later flowered into the successes that we all use today.
I think the fact that you were innovating on hardware, software, and infrastructure at the same time is kind of hard to imagine, right? I love this description of, most people stand on the shoulders of giants, but at General Magic, you built the entire giant from the toes up. And I was just wondering, if you had any more kind of anecdotes or testaments to that spirit, or the kind of crazy ambitious things that you were working on that might have not been covered in the documentary.
Megan, that's one for you, I think.
Yeah, any of us, but I think that it's the same today. It's always the same because we made different choices, which you can see in the movie we might do differently, to really innovate in all dimensions. Obviously, in the hardware team, we were working with parts that we could buy, right? So we were standing on the shoulders of giants and trying to integrate those, but we were doing some specialty ASICs and specialty chips that were integrating, and the idea of software modems and all of this, and that team. But I think part of what we learned the hard way is if you are doing every single thing new, it's too much for everybody to figure out. And so it's better to be an ecosystem where you're bringing different applications forward. And I wouldn't change what we did per se, because, you know, whatever, 4 companies later, lots of different things happened. But I think that often it's better to try to play in the ecosystem. For example, you know, Steve, you worked so close with the AOL team. And in addition to working with the different providers, at the time, you know, open source, open systems, open ideas, truth and reconciliation in South Africa, these were new ideas, APIs, and how we're more transparent. And so we were trying to do that, and we were stuck with these amazing phone companies who were terrific, but they were evolving and really trying to change, which was happening too slowly for us. And so if we could have been a little lighter on our feet with each of the platforms not Siamese twinned together, which was hard for them, but really separated, then we wouldn't have had to innovate on every single dimension. Like we could have connected to AOL or CompuServe and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Megan. I think the other challenge was when the internet came and it really frightened the operating companies. Then the part slowed us down. You know, we had the first working mobile browser that supported images. In fact, and we were only beat by a few weeks by a team that had made a mobile browser on the Newton. And so we were actually really active on the mobile internet, but the partners were extremely frightened. And they were all major equity holders. And a big part of the business case of the company itself were these future revenues from the Telescript networking technology. So I think, you know, choosing your investors and partners carefully was for me one of the really key lessons. But we didn't anticipate the internet.
And the whole paradigm shifted.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember very clearly there was an all-company meeting, and Mike Stern said, "Technology is Telescript is a technology for us getting revenue." And his point being that we had to understand or figure out a business model that worked with the emergence of the web, and that was just when you had it exactly as Steve described, these major telecom companies who had a proprietary model and were very scared, like Megan said, of the internet being this open thing. That was just too far a bridge to cross in terms of trying to reorient the company and getting our partners to go along with a different approach.
I just want to quickly add for everyone in the room that a friend is recording this, just with the permission of all the speakers. But just and the intention here is to kind of have an open discussion for like 30 to 40 minutes with Danielle and myself, as we've done a bunch of research, and people can join. And then we'll invite members of the audience who would like to ask questions, and people can feel free to leave or come at any time. I don't want to be a restriction on anybody's time. I'm just incredibly grateful to have all these people here. But Danielle has also gone down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and I'm sure she has a bunch of questions as well. So I'll let her kind of take them here. If she's able to unmute, but if not, the other thing I'd love to touch on is, you know, one thing I really like about this product, this piece of software we're using, is I feel like it starts to get towards some of the goals that you had. Like I feel you innovated so much on hardware, software, and infrastructure, but perhaps the killer app was not necessarily within your scope, right? We just knew that we needed the tools first. And, you know, we've seen Twitter become quite divisive. We've seen Facebook become quite divisive. On the kind of near year I've spent on Clubhouse, I've started to find, I've really understood people a lot more clearly than when I have read, you know, a few characters on a tweet. And so I guess I'm just curious for all of you, as you objects are being used, both positive and negative, what software or services or things you're excited about, and whether it's Clubhouse or anything else, and whether there are still things that you dreamt up at General Magic that you would love to see be built.
Great question.
Megan.
Sure. I think, I guess what I focus on is, right now, I'm pretty focused on the things that haven't had as many computer science colleagues working on them as colleagues who are exceptional at disciplines. And so where the tech people are rare. So for example, I'm more in the environmental movements, scientists and policy organizers and others are, but there's a little bit less digital tech disruption colleagues integrated in those teams, helping of opinion and a lot of talking at each other, but there's not a lot of integration or social services or like civic tech. It's really the beginning of civic tech. And so I think that these are the areas, like sometimes we launch a thing called Computer Science for All, and it's that would be on the creative side. And all people, so everybody, like we just would learn, when we launched Computer Science for All, the Muskogee Creek tribe was one of the teammates who are teaching robotics in Head Start, which is the 3 and 4 year olds. And a colleague, you know, Steve and Sarah are in England, Tech Moms, and Dr. Sue Black, who teaches coding in 2nd grade. Can we have everybody be fluent with these, just like we teach freshman biology or reading and writing, so that everybody doesn't think like, oh, AI, some other people make that, but we need aloha intelligence, not so much destructive for some intelligence. And so I'm really interested in how our hopes and dreams of these devices and this network capability would empower everyone and reduce people's negative impact on each other or on the planet. So I'm always looking for things like that. That's the really unrealized. Like as an example that's provocative is why don't we know where the children went who were on the border, but we know where every Amazon package is? Like just think about that. Like that's crazy. But it's because colleagues who are elitely capable in different skill sets aren't integrated in those various teams. So those are the areas that I'm hopeful for, and I think that are the possibility areas. And especially, like you mentioned, Clubhouse, it's really exciting. It reminds me of the beginning of the internet times with like the Well and AOL and everybody, when what everyone was saying was the content, because there wasn't tons of content yet. So it was just like message boards and chat rooms and things like that. But I'm also sad looking at the team pages of Clubhouse, because it's really, yet again, a tech bro, non-diverse team. And it's not necessary. There's plenty of practice and there's plenty of talent, but networks are not connected. And so people just keep doing things like that, which is sad.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, Megan. One of the things I've been working on the last 10 or more years is improving connectivity for the developing world. And one of the lessons that I learned from Bill and Andy was the idea that you want to try to give the power of programming to everyone and to make it really simple. So, you know, Bill's invention of HyperCard at Apple, which was this extraordinary, easy to use, but very, very powerful tool to allow people to interact with their computers in a way that didn't require them to be a sophisticated programmer. I think that, you know, as you look ahead towards the next few billion people, and the mobile phone was the only computer they'll ever have, I think there's a huge overlooked market there. Sort of the HyperCard for the next 1 or 2 billion. This notion that we can have, you know, entirely on phone, very simple software development tools to enable people who are in rural parts of Congo or Peru, who want to try to get more advantage and, you know, real utility out of their out of the computer they're carrying with them in their pocket, I think is a huge opportunity.
And for me, I think probably this is Sarah with Steve, but I'm really interested in health applications. That's where I'm focused. And you can already see really remarkable things happen just in basic tracking, like sleep. You know, my big revelation last year was I sleep a lot less than I thought I did. And I think, you know, I think all of us can learn a lot about those very basic health dynamics. And then, of course, there are many more sophisticated applications too. So,
and on the subject of a team page, I do want to highlight that Sarah is behind Steve's avatar here. And Sarah, I believe you were the creator of this documentary. You're the kind of person that initiated this. So I want to make sure you're getting credit for all the work you put in, even though you're hiding behind another avatar. Yeah. And
well, thank you,
thank you so
much
for making it.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure, honestly. And thank you. You know, you've been an incredible advocate of the film. And I'm really curious, how did you get to the Valley? What's yours?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to make it about me, but just briefly, I was building an e-commerce company. I integrated every single payment solution, and then I sold it for a little bit of money. And my best friend told me to stop bumming around. And I heard about this company called Stripe, and they were building a payments solution that didn't cost $50,000 to integrate. And so I just had the great fortune of, like, the first time I came to the Valley in a working setting, of being inside Stripe for a little while and just seeing the rocket ship take off. And that just, like, gave me this mental model for what can be done in the Valley. And so really spoke to me about your work in the documentary, and everybody who was in it and all the characters was this sense of going up against the largest forces in capitalism, taking them on and trying to win, and maybe not winning on the first round, but getting back in the ring and clanging away until you eventually do. And so that's why this documentary spoke to me. And I've never found something that in 90 minutes captures exactly what kept drawing me out here and made me kind of pursue a visa and all those other things. So, thank you so much for that. But I really want to bring it back to all of you. And I guess the next area that I was curious about is if you had any kind of anecdotes from the office or crazy stories or things that happened at, between midnight and midday that you would like to share, or just stuff that you couldn't put in the documentary. It'd be great to hear those.
Well, Steve and I hooked up and got married.
That's right.
I mean, that's great. Steve, I think you need to change your profile picture to you and Sarah, so we can.
That's right. I do, absolutely.
We can do a full refresh.
There was a lot of
stories. Yeah.
Tom, tell a story about going out on the balcony or the
Yes.
parking lot.
Yeah, I bought at some point, I don't know what inspired me, but I bought and this will be a long-winded story for a very short drink, but bear with me.
First of all, Tom, before you go on, Tom was the prankster, so he has 100 hilarious stories like this. But anyway, sorry, just to set up the scene. Go,
yeah,
Tom.
So I had magnetic letters, like you would get a young child to put on a refrigerator so they could learn spelling or learn the alphabet, and I would have these brief messages on the back of my car, and I'd just be driving down 101 or whatever with kill your television or whatever message. So I believe I was the inventor of Twitter in an analog world, is what I'm trying to say. But we were next to Sun Microsystems, and I don't want to say we tormented them, but they were kind of mainline Silicon Valley that we could kind of tweak maybe. One time they were having an office party in the lawn area that was between the two buildings, our building and their building. And Andy Rubin, for some reason, had an industrial strength bullhorn, like that you would use to evacuate a cruise ship. I mean, it was the legit bullhorn. And we got on the roof and started not taunting them, but saying, attention employees of Sun Microsystem, you're at the wrong company. Come join General Magic. We're next door to you. Your commute will be the same. Drop off your resume today, and stuff like that. Steve and I once crashed one of their company parties, and they had a karaoke contest. And Steve, I think we did Love, Love Me Do, and I think we came in second place. And I think when people started questioning whether we worked at Sun, you came up with the answer that we were the midnight shift on IT. And so that's why no one recognized us, because we were never seen during the day typically.
That's right.
But it was a place that was so creative that hijinks were welcome, just because it was part of the culture of the place to have a certain kind of playfulness and a certain kind of winking at the world. And you can see, I think about Susan Kerr's artwork, and that deserves a film in and of itself. I think Susan Kerr is the artist in history, human history, whose work has been viewed by more human beings than anybody else.
It's unbelievable.
I can't validate that, but I just thinking about it briefly, it seems to me that must be the case. But her designs were just so playful and whimsical, and that really spoke to the ethos of the place, along with all the pranks that we would pull.
And that's a great idea, Tom. I'd happily make that movie.
Yay. Susan always, she takes inspiration from so many different things. And one of the ones, if you happen to have an Apple computer, look down at the command key. And she was trying to figure out for the command key, and she actually showed it's the symbol on road signs in Scandinavia, I think Sweden, for castle. And so she adapted it into an icon.
I never knew
That's
that.
so cool.
That's a great story.
Yeah, but
And she
her
didn't
stuff
feature.
is so, everything she did, like one of the things that I got to interview Joanna, who just extraordinary colleague in the Mac team and leader and mentor for all of us. And Joanna said when the Xerox PARC team came over to see the Mac for the first time, they were just like staring and like clicking, and they're like, "How did you do this?" And it's all Susan's art, that is all those icons and graphics and layout, and so beautiful. And then of course she influences Windows, and she influences Next, and then she makes icons, the Next icon, all the icons. So everything we look at in our phones is like exactly as you said, Tom, like heritage to Susan.
Yeah, it's really remarkable, and I think that it's a story that hasn't been told, and it's amazing when you stop and think how ubiquitous her work is, and people don't know her name. To me, it's a crime.
Well, one examples from the movie, the Jobs movie, is there's a scene where the actor Steve playing Steve, that Steve character is mad at Andy because the audio thing isn't booting or whatever, and so Joanna character, I don't know, you guys know this, like movie Jobs opens with Steve, Joanna, and Andy staring up at a screen on stage, and they're trying to get this demo to work. It's not working right. There's a couple things that are wrong in that moment, because first off, there's some screwdriver that they say they can't get into the back. And of course, we all know that probably Susan, that Joanna probably made that design decision, but the character Joanna is like not tech literate. So the character says, what? Which is untrue. But in the scene near the elevator, the Steve character says, Andy, I'm going to leave you out and of the announcement. And so-and-so did this, and so-and-so did that, and so-and-so did this, and Susan made the bag, and so-and-so. And I'm like, Susan made the bag? What? So one of the things that always is a drag is that, we know from studying history that some people get to come through his story and some people don't. And so we have to all be really mindful to make sure that Susan's story stays with us. Because maybe Susan made the bag, but she definitely made all the graphics that all of us use all day. The heritage.
Yeah, the bag is a bit of a sideshow to the entire operating system and the user interface. That's just profoundly offensive.
Yeah, and no one meant harm, but it's like a systemic problem of erasing. Some people evaporate history, and some people come forward. Ada Lovelace almost evaporated, and Darwin came forward, but Darwin said our history, Ada said our future.
I love that quote you mentioned. Sorry, Mike, please go ahead.
Oh, gosh. Well, so it's one of my diligence thoughts when I think about investing in a startup is would I ask Susan Kerr to help them design their product experience or their company's identity? And I feel like if I would be ashamed to ask her because the company's not important enough, the idea is not big enough, I don't invest in the company. So it's always it's a good diligence question because it sums up a lot of things about what you're really looking at the time. And, she's just been involved in some of the most important projects in the last 30 years, maybe more, maybe 40 to 50 years. I mean, it's just incredible.
Immediately after this, I'm going to send her a message because I think you're really onto something. I think it's time, and I'd be happy to do it. Mike, it's so great to hear your voice. It's been ages since I've seen you. Yeah,
it's been a while. Have you been working with the Trial Reach folks still? Are you working on that project?
I'm working in the related space on AI and cancer detection.
Okay, cool.
But yes, so still in the cancer space, and such an amazing time to be in the field.
Yeah.
But anyway, great to see you.
Good to see you too, Richard. I don't think you knew this when you invited me into this room, but Steve and I were fraternity brothers at college, so we've known each other since the 80s.
And we also have good stories to tell that we won't tell today.
That could be a whole other session.
Yeah, let's keep it classy. Remember, this is being recorded. So
that's right. Okay.
But, I do have one story on that note, Mike. You might appreciate this. So, basically, I've been after Steve to do the secret handshake from the fraternity, like our whole married life, and he will not do it. Like even when he do it, so he's a faithful brother. You should know that about him.
Yeah,
excellent.
Richard, I was I was going to bring up a point. You were talking about, did we see things that haven't been realized yet, that were part of the the ideas that we had at General Magic. And I'm curious to hear what my former colleagues have to say about whether they feel a sense of disappointment with the impact that especially social media has had. I have great ambivalence about that. One thing that's interesting to me about having a discussion is, I think a discussion lends itself to more civility and more thoughtful discourse than text does. And I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I certainly that, that's kind of my impression. I don't know whether other people have that or not. But my point is that, technology inherently has a certain impact. It's a great book. If anybody out there is looking for books to read, it's probably out of print, but it was called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. And basically the premise of the book was that television has inevitably certain social impacts that you can't avoid. It's inherent in the technology. The example the guy gives is you can't make a gentler gun. And I don't know if you can fashion technology in a way that doesn't inherently divide and cause self-segregation and people taking more and more extreme positions on things. So I'd be interested to hear what my former colleagues have to say, kind of, the legacy of what we've developed, whether that's, how do you measure the positive against the negative?
Yeah, so every day on the corner on our street, here in DC, the community gathers to protest the coup in Myanmar. And I always think about Facebook and the fact that no matter what the engineers who were working in those teams, especially diverse engineers, tried to do, the senior leadership was not prioritizing destruction and stopping misinformation, stopping bullying, stopping these things. And having worked inside of one of the big tech companies and Google, there's plenty of people inside of these companies who are like those of us outside the companies trying their hardest to work on these features and problems, and senior leadership is not prioritizing them for whatever kinds of reasons. And we have to figure that out, whether it's through regulation, whether it's through demand, whether it's through users or whatever. And I'm sure there's some very technically talented people from the Rohingya community who could have been vice presidents of engineering at Facebook, helping add the features that would reduce genocide. And I know that's sort of a strong thing to say, but it just happens to be true. So thinking about, like Steve, we did this solution summit with the United Nations where we just asked who's already fixing or got promising things to solve the Sustainable Development Goals. And, like last year in their 5th year, we got 1,400 submissions from 141 countries in 3 weeks, including 400 people who wanted to be on the committee. So we made a youth committee and others. And if you open up the possibilities for innovation from everyone, which was the hope of Magic App and these devices, was that these devices wouldn't do, Tom, what you're talking about, which is divide us more, but could we make them empower more people for equality? And that's a big question. And the question is whether the tech giants and our society is rather willing to really look seriously in the face at unconscious and conscious bias and really create inclusion that would matter. So that the example that I was thinking about is Beno Juarez. He's an indigenous leader from the Amazon who does all kinds of advanced manufacturing, and he's building floating fabrication labs in the Amazon. Because why shouldn't the people who live in the Amazon, Steve, for example, as Wi-Fi and connectivity comes, be able to be part of solving vaccines and solving cancer and inventing things and have the same kind of capability and jobs access and innovation access as somebody in Silicon Valley? Because there's a lot of indigenous talent there that doesn't have the power tools that some people get. So thinking about what we were hoping for with General Magic, and many people who began at the beginning of the internet is sort of born out of the hippie world of being able to see the whole Earth electric link, like being able to see the planet from space and say, how could we be connected? But the trick is, or the challenge for all of us, is how to actually include each other. That's the actual moonshot, is inclusion and innovation and talent inclusion.
May I just add one thread here really quickly is I get this sense that there was this enormous amount of optimism around these protocols, right? The open communication systems. And in the industry where I work around crypto, there's also this enormous amount of optimism around the protocols. And I think undoubtedly the internet has had these positive forces, but also these really challenging effects. And I was just wondering if you had any advice for like the younger generation who are just wildly enthusiastic about things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and these like financially empowering and, you know, quite frankly, dangerous protocols that are spreading around the planet. And if we can learn anything from what you learned about communication protocols, we can learn about these kind of financial protocols and how to think about to maybe steward them as best we can.
Is it okay if I try that for a second, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go for it,
I mean, whatever stimulation is great.
Yeah, so maybe I should talk a little bit about my relationship to this topic. So I was one of the seed investors in Twitter. And so, you know, you think about what's happened over the years. And what I've started to believe is that these networks are a different form of business. You know, it's almost like a mix between a company and a country. And if you think about a country says, okay, we have a set of rules, and you know, in the United States is the Constitution and a set of laws that are designed to protect individual rights, but also make it not in the interests of bad actors to infringe upon people's rights. And you know, you have separation of powers. And what I'm starting to believe is that networks, because the customers are co-creators, which was different from when a company builds and sells widgets, that in the future, network capitalist entities need governance models by design. And part of why the problem I think Silicon Valley has, if you even choose to be charitable to the optimistic people in Silicon Valley, is that the people who started the US had a natural distrust for government. They'd come from philosophical debates about how do you not let individuals have arbitrary power? How do you have a system that is resilient to bad actors? And what I find is a lot of people in Silicon Valley don't naturally go there in their first assumptions, right? They assume that people are going to want to behave the way they behave. They don't recognize that you got to have a system that's resilient for bad actors. And in fact, that's part of what makes it powerful. So to me, part of what's fascinating about Bitcoin is that they created governance embedded in their protocol. They make it not in your interest to try to do a double spend or a bad transaction. And so like when I think about the entrepreneurs building these protocols, I think you've got to be very defensive in your design. And if you do a good job of it, you create the conditions where, just like in the US, you get a lot of people who want to immigrate to the US because our governance model is better than, say, Venezuela's. You get people wanting to immigrate to your community of people who share the protocol together. I don't know if that seems kind of abstract, but I think that part of the problem that we have in Silicon Valley is we don't naturally go to a place where version 1 of your product, you got to assume that there could be bad actors. And so the problem Twitter has is there's no way to decide whether Alex Jones ought to be on the platform or not, because there was no framework for deciding that early on, and what was okay, what was not okay. Anyway, I'm probably rambling some, but I think that's right to the point. And, you know, it brings up and if I can just weave together what you're saying and some of what Megan has said, you know, what is the design center of a technology? To answer your question, Richard, I would say to young entrepreneurs that on the one hand, you have to have a strong vision and pursue it relentlessly and have the kind of most rosy picture of it, because it's just so hard to shift the world. If you're not all in, it doesn't happen. But at the same time, you know, I would advise, think deeply about what your values are, what will ultimately be meaningful to you in terms of the footprint you want to leave, and what is the design center of your technology. I mean, Megan made such a great point, of course, that, you know, civility and bringing people together and democratizing access is not the design center. And once the train leaves the station, if that's not the design
center, it's really hard to change things. And I think to Megan's point, I think part of the problem is that you have, you know, the vast majority, I think it's 90%, 96% of venture funds go to companies founded by men. And men don't have a monopoly on great ideas. As a man, I would say we probably are maybe we're overrepresented in terms of having stupid ideas. So let's get a wider diversity of genders and gender identities in terms of people who are funded. All of that is to say,
and also, Tom, crucially, the very rarely are the first 10 women, first 10 people women in startups, which really irritates me, because those are the ones who make the kind of intergenerational wealth, right? The first 10 employees.
Yeah.
So we've got to fix that as well. Not only convincing women companies, but to like take the leap on the early first.
We
the
don't
founding
need to
teams.
convince. No, we don't need to convince them. Yeah, there's no
Got it.
convincing. There's
Right.
The problem is not that. The problem is bias, because there's plenty of people. I was just reading Arlen Hamilton. I don't know if she invested in 175 companies already from Black women or others. Like, there's plenty of people. It's just the filter is really messed up.
Sorry, big, please, Mike.
Well, the other thing, since we're talking about advice to founders, one of the things that I really appreciated about General Magic, I mean, when General Magic started, these people were my heroes in high school, right? Andy Hertzfeld, you know, Susan, like Bill Atkinson, who'd done like Lisa and Mac Paint, Quick Draw, and like HyperCard. I mean, these people were just incredible. But what to me, what General Magic personifies is kind of this aesthetic. So like a lot of people say to me, when you start a startup, you should start a vitamin or a painkiller. And I just think that's totally wrong, right? Like, I think that's an intellectually bankrupt way to think about a great startup. The best entrepreneurs I've seen, they do it for aesthetic reasons. There's something in the world missing that could be great, and they build the thing that's missing that could be beautiful. And so part of what I really appreciate about the General Magic story is it's yes, it would have been great if it had been a huge outcome, but just the commitment to building something great for its own sake and for the aesthetic appeal of doing that. And we need more entrepreneurs who think that way in today's world. We need more entrepreneurs who want to solve an aesthetic missing in the world, rather than kind of these hackneyed, is that a vitamin or a painkiller? What's the ROI calculation equation of release 1.0? What's the minimum viable version of 1.0? Like, I think we've gone too far in that direction in entrepreneurship right now.
And Mike, maybe adding to that, I think the aesthetic is part of it. I think the purpose is the key. So purpose with beautiful aesthetic, that, you know, in the case of General Magic, the goal was to make something that could empower people and be in an ecosystem like our phones are today. That kind of idea that it would be valuable to connect and network us to help you in your daily life. That idea is important. And I'd say some of the most extraordinary entrepreneurs I'm working with now, we met through the MIT Solve Indigenous Communities Fellowship. And so this is where we're asking, in the first year, the Dakotas, the Oshkosh, so the Standing Rock, Pine Ridge, the people who are living in the North and South Dakota regions. The second year, we added Hopi and Navajo. And the third year, it's Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, and Native Hawaiians, innovators who are already working on some solution for energy, solar, agriculture, anti-trafficking of people, educational inclusion. I mean, people are founding universities, working on language, AI. You know, in Navajo, the size of West Virginia, there's 10 grocery stores. So people are working on genius solutions to food access and food deserts. And so I'd say that the purpose there is community benefit. And the community is using revenue as a tool, not as a goal. And so I think there's innovators all over the world who have this purpose-driven community benefit goal where they're using a business model for that. But I think a lot of our colleagues in venture aren't the networks are disconnected. And so people aren't hearing those things. So the beautiful aesthetic purpose-driven thing that they would make isn't getting funded, and we're all losing. I don't know if everybody's seen the book, some of us, but it's extraordinary about how everybody loses when this stuff is happening.
And Mike, I would say, in terms of the culture at General Magic, Andy and Bill and Mark, I think they really thought of themselves as artists. And
Joanna too.
That combined with the really clear vision that they had, that was about making the world a better place, to a culture within the company of apprenticeship where we were treated as equals, and they wanted to help us grow into being people that were as capable and as skilled as they were through this kind of master apprentice model. And because the vision was so compelling, it just drew this incredible set of people, and that we all felt empowered and working together towards this great goal. And so I think you're absolutely right. This combination of the kind of the right motivation about changing the world with a really clear vision, and creates these corporate cultures that are the ones that outperform those that are profit centric or
and Steve, I guess when I think of the word design, I think of the word design and aesthetics like writ large, right? It's more than just how something looks aesthetically, but to me, great founders don't try to predict the future; they design the future writ large, right? They imagine and design a different world. And their artistry comes from being able to notice things that normal people don't notice. But then they also move people to that different future very often against their own logic, right? Because they've got to recruit employees when there's a big chance of failure. They've got to get early customers when they're probably going to go out of business. So like, if you're going to create a future, by definition, you have to bend the arc of the present and move people with you to that future. And so to me, design writ large is kind of what that's about.
Yeah, I think so. And what I think Steve's trying to add in is this idea of co-creation. And so not the hero founder, the founder has the catalytic spark and is able to communicate that, or the co-founders. But it's, Reid Hoffman always talks about the smart generalists who join quickly. And if you're in an ecosystem, you're more likely to be successful than an island, or making, which we learned in General Magic, making too many of the pieces. But it's in the co-creation and the teamwork that the most success comes.
Right. And it's co-creation, not just with the team itself, right? But with your early customers. Like, the best startups I've seen, there are a bunch of people who want to design a different future together, and they're in on the same secret together. But they're all, whether it's the investor or the founders or the first startup team or even the early customers, that they all kind of believe the same belief, and they all try to co-create the future together, right? Starting a movement of sorts.
That was definitely like General Magic, or the most powerful thing about General Magic. I have to say, though, that Mark, I've known some amazing entrepreneurs and founders, but Mark had a special ability in his ability to see the future so completely and articulate it. And to be honest, I never met Steve Jobs, but I don't personally know anyone who's close. And of course, the team buying into the idea and then joining, and as Megan said, co-creating is what made it such an extraordinary place. But to see him literally go into the future and come back, it felt like with a tablet.
Yeah,
Physically and metaphorically.
That's right.
It was an extraordinary thing, and I still. Yeah,
I'm sorry
to
interrupt. Please go ahead.
No, you go. I'm done.
I would say, as the communications guy there, it kind of spoiled me for my career, because I've never encountered somebody since who's so charismatic and can take, in the documentary, John Scully says, business is a lot about telling stories, and whoever tells the best story wins. And Mark just had not only a great story to tell, but he was a great storyteller. And he would come up with metaphors, and he would come up with stories to illustrate the points he was trying to make. And exactly to Mike's point, if you're trying to create or move things to where they presently aren't, how do you get people to do that? How do you get people to get their mind around what you're talking about? And Mark was just preternaturally gifted at that. Kind of a once in a career type of person to be the communications protege for.
I just wanted to quickly invite Veronica to maybe share her perspective. I know she was deeply involved in the creation of the documentary, and it'd just be great to hear from her if she has anything to add. But no worries if you're not available right now. But thank you for all the work
Hi.
you put in.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're hosting this room today. And hi, everyone. Hi, Stephen, Sarah, and Tom and Megan. And
Hey.
great to meet you, Mike, Danielle, and Richard. I joined the documentary literally at their premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2018. I was working at the festival and was completely blown away by this film and the emotional impact of it and the untold story and everything to learn from it. And I helped them put on a premiere of the film for almost 1,000 former magicians and friends, family, and press in San Jose a few months after the premiere, which was really amazing to watch. So I personally wasn't involved in the making of the documentary or, of course, the company itself, but I've been a witness to the journey of the story, you know, being shown to the world over the last few years. And it's just been so incredible to see the kind of healing and transformation and seeing the magicians reflect on that time and not only what they learned, but how generous they are today in wanting to share the lessons of that time with, you know, future magicians and anyone out there today who's inspired by the story. And one thing I love to share about what I've observed is like how you don't even need to have a connection to technology or work even in business to feel moved by this movie. Like I've seen people who are, you know, artists or singers who walk away crying watching the movie because I think because the vulnerability that you see on screen is such a human thing that you don't often see people doing, especially men. You know, like I think that part in the film where Mark talks about why he made the film and he wants to tell the story to his children is a really powerful moment. And that it's really a story about failure, and all of us know what that feels like. So you know, I love the movie. I think it's really great, and I wanted to just come on stage too to share with anyone listening. If you have not seen the film and you'd like to watch it, there's many ways you can. You can just Google the words General Magic and you'll come to our website. I also have it listed in my bio on Clubhouse, generalmagicthemovie.com. We're on, here in the United States, we're on Time. You can also rent the movie on iTunes and Amazon and kind of all those places you can rent films. We're also on Canopy, which is Canopy with a K. It's like an incredible streaming platform that you can use with your library card. So you can watch the film for free that way. And in the UK, we're on iTunes as well. And then if you're in other countries, you can watch us on Vimeo. It's only with English subtitles, but we're working on getting it seen around the world. And it's really our goal to have the film seen by as many people as possible. So if you have seen the movie and you're inspired by it, it helps us so much for you to tell your friends about it. And it especially helps us too. We love doing private screenings, like for all kinds of places like conferences, high school classrooms, companies, nonprofits, anyone in between. The filmmakers are really generous with their time to do Q&As and things like that. So if you're listening and you're interested in that, please contact us. You can DM me on Instagram through my bio here, or you can go on our website and send us an email. My email is veronica@generalmagicthemovie.com. So I'm always here to answer questions. Just I want to make sure everyone can see this movie because it's very inspiring. And thanks for having me.
One of the things, thanks, Veronica. One of the things I wanted to share was about one of our colleagues that we lost named Zarko Dragonic. And he created software modem. He did so many things, and he was so beautiful and so delightful. And unfortunately, he suffered from depression. But maybe just this little image of how you can think differently about rules. And it comes in this one little image, which is I went to Zarko and I said, we're meeting at 3 p.m. Are you free? And he said, AM or PM? Right?
Because that either
Because like it's
waiting.
like whatever, you know, like that's how we were at General Magic. We just worked all the time and had fun together and tried to come up with something that would be wonderful for people and tried to not make things that would be destructive technologies and that. And so just in that idea of like thinking broadly about the rules we've made in society. And I was thinking a little bit about Grace Hopper. For those who don't know, Grace Hopper invented coding languages, and she just felt like we could broaden participation in tech if people could code human-like language instead of machine code. And people told her it was a dumb idea, but she just did it. And so, wrote the first compiler. And so what became COBOL and now is, Java and Perl and all these things. And one of the things she said was, don't let them tell you you're wrong if you're not. And so I just wanted to say that, because I think that a lot of times, we have to take out of our whole selves what we hope exists in the world. And sometimes it doesn't work, like our general magic time, but then eventually it might just work. Some of our colleagues stayed at it for 4 companies and they made it. And some people had a different goal and they made it. And so just for those listening, like, think about what is it that you need to see in the world that you hope was here? What kind of challenges do we have? You can work.
I think I want to make a T-shirt as a thank you gift for you and everyone up on stage, and I think it should have that quote printed on it.
Yeah, Grace Hopper is amazing. We were able to give her the Medal of Freedom. President Obama chose her. And it was incredible because Bill and Melinda Gates won that same year. And when they came in the White House, Bill Gates was like, Grace Hopper, and we had brought her stuff out of the Navy archives. And, there's nothing from Edison that isn't in a museum, but all of Grace's stuff is in a box. But, that's gender imbalance. So anyway, Bill saw the case and he's like looking at it. And it was great because the whole press corps is like, Grace who? And so she got her day too.
That's so lovely.
Amazing. So I just would like to invite anyone from the audience who would like to come up and ask a question. What I'm intending on doing is bringing up one person at a time, letting them ask the question, and then moving them back to the audience just to kind of keep the discussion a little clearer. And just to remind everybody, this is being recorded. It'll be posted to YouTube, and hope that's okay with everyone. If anyone has a problem or we need to do some editing, let me know. So yeah, I'm going to first bring up one chap who's been tweeting out everything, Dylan, if he'd like to pop up. And then I'll go through the kind of people who've raised their hands. And really at any point, any of the guests, anyone on stage, if you need to leave or anything, thank you so much for the near hour you've given us already. And we're all just incredibly appreciative. My DMs are exploding with lots of positive comments and people who've either seen the documentary or are about to watch it. Yeah, so Dylan, far away.
Hey, thanks for bringing me up, Rick. So this has been so incredible to listen to you all. And I'm a young maker myself, senior in high school, and I'm on the verge of trying to get out to Silicon Valley to work more in my startup, but also trying to convince my parents that that's the better path to university. But really what I wanted to ask you about was, someone had mentioned earlier how the Apple team went to Xerox PARC, how they were really enamored with the whip metaphors and the design of the desktop metaphor. There's one person from that early Apple Macintosh team who really captivated me, and that was Jeff Raskin, whose work has been a huge inspiration to me, especially along the lines of humane design and how we can apply that to so many of the social topics around all of this technology and all of the new platforms. So I was just wondering sort of if there are any anecdotes that you could share of Raskin's, or if you're familiar of his work, or if there's sort of any application to humane design that you could see foreshadowed in your work at General Magic.
I would just jump. I confess I'm not familiar with his work, but I would say one thing in terms of humane design, the UI for Magic Cap, we did just extensive user testing on that. And the design center of that was anybody should be able to pick up the device and understand how to use it. And if they got confused or couldn't find a feature, that was our fault. That was on us. So, and really the design center of that was for people to have a delightful experience using the technology. So often people have a experience with technology where they end up feeling stupid, that they end up feeling like they're not competent, and that, why can't I understand this? There's something wrong with me. And so I think it was a very, to use the word that you used, humane approach to technology, and really trying to make technology graceful and affirming, as opposed to this kind of cold experience of, the technology says this is how I work, take it or leave it.
Yeah, and I think also, I think that Jeff, I guess Susan and Joanna, Andy, and Bill would tell us about how they teamed with Jeff. So because we learned from them, but I would bet mix of what we learned, that the humane design ideas that you're talking about, that what Tom just shared about making sure it wasn't making people feel bad to use it, but that it should just work for them, was definitely coming through from the Mac team experiences that they drove for, that, stand on the shoulders of giants, into Xerox PARC and others. And I think this idea in general, which sometimes people call curb cut design, the best case is if you can find people who are the most marginalized, who need the solution you're trying to make, and get them in your team, like a curb cut on the sidewalk. Like, we all use that curb cut, even though it was made maybe more for a wheelchair or somebody who had less access to walking and stairs and things. And so this idea of strollers in just a more comfortable way, it all flows when you design for everybody, and especially the most marginalized, which is what the United Nations tries to encourage everybody to do. If we can think that way, we can have much more inclusive technologies.
Yeah, and it's advice for someone starting a new company. I think you can't overestimate the importance of user testing. At Magic, we would have 5 or 10 people a day testing features that had been written overnight. And as Tom said, if it confused the tester, then it was our fault. And I'm still surprised at the lack of the kind of user testing centric design that I see in the Valley. I think it was one of the primary reasons that Magic Cup was so easy to use and so compelling, and that was really a lesson brought from the Mac team, and I think inspired by Raskin.
We still have 600 tapes of user interface in Matt's studio. And that's incredible archive. I need to go back and look at some of those. But as you said, it was just, we were devoted to that testing. But so few people get that right, making something easy to use and understandable from the first look. Very difficult to do. Very important, though.
Yeah, thank you so much for those responses. That was incredible.
Great. Manam, do you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I'd like to think that I'm an optimist about people, and that I, have been fortunate to meet a ton of brilliant people working on all sorts of problems. Was there a particular moment you guys felt, knew, or ever sort of recognized that you had this little lightning in a bottle over at General Magic? And is that something that can sort of be sought out? I know that there are obviously people working on really important, really big problems, but is there a particular way that you sort of go out and figure out that, these are the people who sort of have the more, ambition, for lack of a better word, in like the scale of what they're trying to build, and like the dedication with what they're trying to build, as opposed to, other factors?
That's such a great question. I would say it's super hard to replicate. I wish I could give you an answer and kind of, give you a methodology to get there. I think that to something that Mike and Megan said, people who are motivated by something that is not about, vitamins or painkillers, that is not about making money, that they have a vision, that they have an impatience with the way the world is, and a really hopeful, optimistic vision of how things might be. That's a huge factor in capturing that lightning in the bottle. And it's hugely unifying of a team, because people are motivated by a shared vision and a shared sense of, gosh, we can make something that will help so many people and the world will be a better place for it. So I don't know. I don't know how good an answer that is, but find like-minded people who are motivated by a positive vision of the way things might be, I think, is one component of it.
Yeah, I think that I'm lucky to know some astronauts, and they're always like this mission-driven capability. Even you're working across lots of different skill sets, whoever's there. So finding people like Tom, you talked about Mark's vision. If there's somebody sort of sees something, or a group of people that sees something that could be piling on together for the mission and is important. I also think that a lot of times, like one of the things that I was lucky to give the commencement address at MIT, and I told them that I thought there were two things to do. One, go where there's tons of technical and scientific and others, and advance the field, and then also go to places where there's not a whole lot of people like y'all, and then work with genius experts of those other fields and blend in and kind of try to advance the possibilities in other sectors. I mean, a really good example right now that we got to work on is civic tech. It's really, the governments are the wealthiest things in the world, and they have really dusty technologies. And there's not as many, there's wonderful technical people in governments like NASA and others in US government, but there's not as many people in the main rooms, say when we're working on foster care or school lunch or other challenges. And there's incredible people who know exactly what they're doing there. And if you could team up with them and work on these harder problems, just like we work on maybe self-driving cars, we could solve some of the hardest challenges in the world. So looking for problems worthy and people who have genius expertises and trying to blend those expertises together is really important. Cup half full. And the other part of that, I think, is also trying to work more on one of our colleagues at General Magic, a guy named Steve Perlman. He had made the Mac work in color early on, and then had joined us for a bunch of stuff. And he's wild. And Steve always said that he felt like the biggest change over these couple hundred years is less about the technology and more about how more of humanity comes to the table. Like if you could go 1,000 years from now and look backwards, what was the biggest change? And if we're successful, first off, we won't have destroyed our home with climate change challenges, and we have gotten to green energy in these places, but we will have included each other in a much better way. Kind of that Star Trek future, but even more. I think that's the goal. And if you can figure out how to have a more inclusive team, you will just be more successful. So just some thoughts.
Definitely, Megan. And one of the things I like to say is that diverse ecosystems survive unexpected events much better. And I think we were spoiled at General Magic, not only because of the talent of the team, that the diversity of the team was so high. And, we had relatively good talents, but we also had just this enormous array of people with different skills that and different perspectives, and that enabled us to not only come up with all these great ideas, but find solutions for all challenges very, very quickly. So I think the diversity point is a really fundamental one.
And we didn't have very good racial diversity, which is a challenge in Silicon Valley and needs to be fixed as a high priority. It's always like number 10 on the list or 20, not number 3, like ship Chrome. So we need to move all of this inclusive work up, because if we can field the whole teams, we're just going to make better products that also, to Tom, your points early on and some of the questions and conversations, include bothering to prioritize features that don't have racist face recognition, or bothering in the 1.0 version to work on misinformation, or bothering, and prioritizing at those levels, rather than kind of saying, well, I don't have the lived experience. I'm a SVP in engineering. I hear what you're saying, but I'm not going to put it on the feature list for prioritization for 1.0 ship. We'll do it later. It's just not okay.
Rebecca, I'd love to hear your question if you have one for the group. And thanks for coming up. And I'd just like to encourage absolutely anybody to raise their hand. Would love to hear more perspectives and get some different kinds of questions going.
Yeah, thank you. This is Rebecca. Hi, everybody. I'm a big fan
Hey,
of
Rebecca.
me. And now we're actually working together with Veronica in, helping the world see the incredible lessons that can be drawn from the movie. And I was just listening to, I think Sarah said something about Mark going into the future and coming back with tablets. And of course, that reference to Moses and the 10 Commandments made me think of not only the fact that, there was a similar looking at the future and seeing the future component in that story, but also that there were 40 years of wandering the desert before the promised land or the actual target was accomplished. And I was thinking, in the world of technology, oftentimes we do have the visionaries who have the image of the future and execute on it. And those are the famous ones, Elon Musk's, the Steve Jobs. But sometimes we have the Mark Porats who see the future, lay out the foundation and the ecosystem for that to happen over the next 3 decades. But there is no recognition or fame, right, for those individuals. And that made me think that today we are so focused on giving the prize and the award to the executioners, the ones who actually get to the destination, that we forget that this is a relay process with a lot of people coming in and doing important things earlier than the last person. And I think that may cause some of the brightest minds of today, the young innovators and entrepreneurs, to focus on problems that are easy, when we actually need all of them to think about problems that need to be solved, that may not have a final solution that is scalable for a couple decades, right? So I just wanted the magicians to comment on that. How do we transfer some of that credit to the earlier members of the relay, so that we can encourage youth to tackle problems that are really difficult and challenging?
It's a really good point, Rebecca. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to make the film, actually, is to show that there was a huge whole team behind this, and this was just one step in the development of mobile phones. But I always say to my team, so I'm working in the AI cancer detection space, and I say to my team, it may not be us, but the amazing science that you're doing and the product that you've built, which detects breast cancer, it will play an important part in this journey, and it will make a contribution to the success of whichever company, whichever product ultimately is the one that gets widely adopted. And I truly believe that. And it's totally changed my perspective, having made the film. Before then, I felt entirely differently about failure. And now I really do think that taking those steps, making those contributions, that they are all really important. And I just make sure that everyone who's working with me knows how valuable that is.
Rebecca, I really love, thank you for this question and for mentioning this metaphor of the baton, passing the baton. And I always remembered, when we were in government, how many people had run with the baton before us and who we would hand to next and how that would work. And so it's really important to remember this. And Sarah, what you just said is exactly right. One of the things I do that helps is to study history in order to understand the future. And so sometimes I think, we're in the fourth industrial age. And so thinking about the first industrial age, which is centered around when Dickens wrote Oliver, is Oliver Twist an Amazon worker today? I don't know, or a ghost worker who has to clean up porn on the internet, or is that Oliver Twist today? And is Mary Shelley still writing Frankenstein? Should we raise the monster of AI or not? Who gets to raise the monster? Is it a monster, or could it be Aloha intelligence? What is that? And, Charles Dickens was at the bedside of Ada Lovelace, who's the first person to write an algorithm. It nearly disappeared. But she said it was to bequeath to the generations a calculus of the nervous system in the 1840s. Speaking of AI, maybe calculus, maybe quantum. And then in the second industrial age, Jane Addams, Double D. Adams, Chicago, I think the industrial age of then, and Ida B. Wells. And Ida and Frederick Douglass protested the Chicago World's Fair of 1892, where Tesla was so famous. And by the way, his mother was a mechanical genius who influenced him deeply, and we should know that. Same with Susan Wright, Orville Wilbur's mom. But here was Tesla known, but nobody knew that there was an African-American exhibition hall fully designed, ready to go for 1892 that was never seen because they were barred. So we don't have a pipeline problem in Silicon Valley. We have a culture problem. And I think that it's really important to see these people, because Ida, who was trying to bring everyone together, was the Black Lives Matter data science journalist of the late 1800s with her red record. And she won the Pulitzer Prize last year, 100 plus years late. But, people have been doing this hard work. It's just they get evaporated in history. So if you know about them, you're on the track and the baton is passing to you. and your team and your friends and your colleagues. And it's okay to work on these harder problems together and be in that relay race of trying to get the arc of justice that we deserve. That technology can be a big part of solving for us if we have broad teams and if we stop having so much bias in our funding.
Thank you so much for that question, Rebecca. I really appreciate it. And Megan, that was a really beautiful response. Thanks a lot. I'd love to invite Joanna or Shira if they're available to ask their questions.
Hey, Richard. Thanks for inviting me up. It's nice to see you all. I know a couple of you on stage. My name is Joanna Popper, and I work in virtual reality at HP. And I love the doc, and I love this conversation. I joined part of the way through. So what I was wondering was, when you were in this space, when you were in the company, did you realize like how lively special it was and the group of people? And have you worked in other environments like that since? And and what from those experiences were you able to bring into other environments? Thank you.
I just have to be honest and say that I had no idea. So as a filmmaker, I had been brought out to Silicon Valley to film General Magic, and I just thought it was it was certainly a very unusual environment, nothing that I'd ever encountered before, but I had no idea how special it was. I just took it for granted. And it really was only, 15 years later when I was reading, I think it was 15 years later, Isaacson's book, when I was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing story. And oh my God, I was actually there and filmed it. So I think the movie here.
I confess, ignorant about just how prominent the people at the company were. I learned very quickly from friends, especially my brother, who was already in technology working at Apple, that I should thank my lucky stars that I stumbled into the opportunity I did. So as time went on, I began to understand exactly how special a place it was. There's hands down nothing in my life that's measured up to that, or been anywhere near equivalent in terms of how deep the talent was and how grand the vision was. I think in terms of takeaways from it, I think Steve mentioned and Megan mentioned culture. I think the culture of an organization is fundamental. I'm not saying anything that's new, but I just want to reemphasize that, look long and hard at kind of what the norms are and the values are of an organization, because that's going to be your life. I mean, we spend the vast majority as adults of our waking lives engaged in work. And that's how you're spending your time. That is your life. That is your life experience. So to the extent that you can find organizations whose values dovetail with yours and who champion norms that you believe in and value things that you value, that to me has been the biggest takeaway from my time at General Magic, I would say, not to sound too philosophical about it.
I think it's
and
really...
from the...
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Megan. You were actually there.
Yeah, but it's this experience of being in creative teams. I was going to say that I was really lucky to be in a team like General Magic when I went to high school, and it wasn't the kind of capabilities of elite capabilities that make something, which is make a product, but it was. I went to an inner city public school in Buffalo that was magnet school that was made out of the lawsuits because crazy people were lying down in front of buses in Boston. And I went to school in the 70s. And our teachers, we didn't have a lot of funding, public school, but they were able to create the school. And they did it together and they worked together and they created the most magical experience for us to learn, really active learning. And so I feel lucky that I was in a space of sort of creative learning. And I've had a lot of chances to be in environments, I'd say, President Obama's team was just extraordinary, just like General Magic, like elite talent to learn from and work with and execute with. And I think just to Tom's point, I was really lucky in college to take acoustics from Professor Bose, like Bose speakers. And one of the things he taught us was to just really pay attention, like Tom was just saying, to culture around you.
And don't run away from hard problems, but go away from bad culture. And if people are holding you back, or, you know, if it's a lot of sexism and racism or other things, or other kinds of isms going on, you know, there's other place to be. And so I think, just to answer the specific question, we were often in our first or second actual job, us younger ones. And so we didn't really realize, as most people have said, what an extraordinary learning corporate environment we were in. But just paying attention to that altogether, and really forcing our environments around us to be better, especially post-COVID, as we build back better, you know, we can have the kind of culture that everybody deserves. And we should try for that.
Just one other quick thing to add. What I like about appreciate about doing this movie is that none of us know how much time we're going to have. You know, all we know is that so far, none of us are going to have infinite time. And so every day is a gift. And to me, a lot of what life is about is honoring the gift of your time by spending it on things that reflect a gratitude for the fact that you get to be here in the first place. And I imagine that everybody who was on the General Magic team felt like they were honoring the gift of their time, whether the project succeeded or not. And, you know, you're going to do things in life. Some of them are going to work, some of them aren't going to work. To me, the high order bit is that you honor the gift of your time by engaging in things that you think are just truly exceptional work, that that show implicit in that work gratitude for the fact that you get to be around in the first place. And so to me, that's kind of the idea. That's why I find the movie so compelling, is that you know, whether or not the project worked out or not, to me, is secondary. It was about a bunch of people who had that inside them, this idea of honoring the gift of their time. And that's why a lot of them went on to do great other things, right? But I think that the real failure is not to try for your time, and how precious and fleeting it is.
Mike, it's so amazing to hear you say that. I didn't actually even know that you'd seen the movie, but I think you captured it beautifully. I do have this acute sense of time and that preciousness, and to honor the stories and the commitment and the things that we try, even if we don't succeed.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
So unfortunately,
unfortunately,
I've got to run, Richard. But I bought a Susan Kerr pirate flag off her website, so to honor Susan Kerr.
Amazing. Nice one.
All right.
Mike.
See y'all later.
Amazing.
Thanks. Okay.
And I just want to take this moment to say that anybody who does need to get on with their day or crack on, totally understand if you got to dip now. But if not, if you do have some more time, Shira, I know, has a question, Daniel, Ola, Dapo, and Rishi. So I'll just go in that order, and thank you so much to everyone so far. And we'll just kind of carry on until folks head out. But Shira, you're up.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for holding this panel. This is awesome. So the question I have is kind of a follow-up of something that was asked before about hard problems and getting people to work on hard problems, but also just about like technology and the trajectory in general. So something that I've kind of observed lately, at least from what I've seen, is that it's almost impossible to talk about the future of any one specific technology in isolation, because in like today's hyper-connected world, everything affects everything else. So you were mentioning how you can't really just like push certain things to the side in terms of priorities when you find out about them. How do you kind of stay on top of that? And is there a need, do you think, like in today's world, for a more flexible kind of plan and approach to things than there was before?
Yeah, I think it's always been dynamic like that. That things come up and you don't realize there's unintended consequences, and you have to reprioritize. There's bugs in codes, you have to quickly address them in code. And so I think that the more, like Steve, you were talking about, the broader, the more resilient your team can be, it comes from its diversity and breadth. So that's a pretty important part of it. I don't know, Steve, if you would add anything.
Yeah, and I think, you know, looking back at the company, one of the things that we didn't do well was it was before the days of kind of continuous development and rapid iteration. You know, we were user testing features internally extremely rapidly, but we weren't actually shipping. We were, it took us years to ship the first version, and then subsequent versions were also, many months apart. And I think for me, the balance has to be struck between where we are today. I think generally in most engineering cultures, and I spent many years at Facebook in the interim between General Magic and now, where the focus was on just shipping as rapidly as possible, but striking a balance between that and what I think General Magic did very, very well, which was to really try to understand the impact that you wanted to have in the world, and involving users in the design of the product and customers in the design of the product, as Mike was saying earlier. So I think you need to have a very, very rapid iterative approach to your product, but you also need to ensure that not only are you aligned with the needs of your customers, but that you're aligned with your mission.
There's also one other thing was that sometimes, like we talked about this earlier, but the meeting where Steve, where Mike Stern was sharing with us, like our network customers were so in need of us to stay the course, and really we needed to shift to the internet. And we had amazing leadership. Lucia Hicks Williams was VP, Curtis Sasaki, Shamili Sharhani, people in the product teams, and others really pushing to help us move. But we were kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. So sometimes you are in a ecosystem that we had sort of gone down a path that we probably should have changed, and the film shows that, but we couldn't. And we had team members there trying to help us figure that out, and they were right. And so I don't know, it's hard, but getting into what Steve's talking about, this more iterative way of moving, is really important, especially with our government technologies, which is, in civic tech, we are often buying in waterfall, and we need to be buying in much more iterative ways.
I think it's just such a phenomenally good question. I would just add that, to the point that Steve has made and that Megan has made about diversity, and in at least two dimensions. One is in terms of ideas and vision, having a diverse group. And second of all, looking out for dangers that are lurking out there. Some people will see opportunities that other people won't, and then some people will see warning signs that other people don't. So having a diverse team really breeds a